I'll start. My name is Tim Young. I'm in the Carrollton office. Real estate now for 10 years. I was a police officer for 15 years prior to that. Originally from Michigan. I haven't stepped on a snowbank on a regular basis, so Virginia's become my home. I've been pretty happy with that there too. So with Kevin Curry, the Kevin Curry Group, so I'm a primary buyer agent. Any listings that I might acquire, Kevin and I will do a co-list together in that regard. But buyer agency makes me happy. So.
Adrian Spears, I work out of the great Ashland office. Come up and visit us. We've got an awesome town. I work on the Dean Cheatham team and head buyer's agent on the team and kind of coach our teammates through the buying process. And one thing that struck me when we were talking the other day is, the market's just constantly changing. It's kind of cliche, but you have to be on your toes to know what's going on, especially if you're representing buyers right now. Would be heading to my 23rd year in the business.
Peyton Birchall with the Marshall Group. Stoney and I are a team over there at the Oaklawn office with Hometown, technically Mechanicsville, but satellite of that is Oaklawn. Let's see, I've been licensed since '05. I was a part-timer from '05 through 2010, so I've been full-time since 2010, which is 19 years in the business, I guess they're not, if I'm counting that right. Yeah. So on the buyer side, like being that advisor, that sounding board, that confidant, that person that they go to for the education, talk them through the things, talk them through the process, coaching them, getting them through everything there, and really being that advisor type role there for the buyers. All right.
All of you guys started by way of being on the team, having a team leader, essentially referring you buyers to start. Is that correct?
Essentially.
So generate a lot of your own business today, I'm assuming.
Yep.
I think you were the one, Tim, on our Zoom call, and you talked about the importance of trust.
That's
Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about like trying to do elevator speech in terms of like the importance of or the value of buyer agency. It really can't be answered in a couple of easy pitches. It's what you do. Do as you do, not as I say, in that regard. And you got to have a process to start to develop that trust, because we talked about that and we all agreed right away that trust is very important. How you establish that, and it takes some time. Just in terms of making a prospect into a client. How many touches does that take? How many phone calls, texts, meetings? Same thing. You have to kind of take that process so that you create that trust. You can start with rapport. You meet them for the first time. They haven't run for the door right away. So then you've got that next meeting. So then it's just, once they get to the point that you show them that first house and you're showing them what you can do and what your value is really starting to establish at that point in time, like what you know about houses in general and that process, that's where that trust starts to set in. And at that point, you created a relationship, not a transaction, but the relationship. That's what's really, really important.
You guys want to add on to that?
I think I was thinking through my process and how I do business, and I think one of the things that's natural to me and I like to be good at is I really try to put myself in that particular buyer's shoes and really understand kind of where they are. And if I do that, people are appreciated, they're attracted to that, and then that's a way of building trust, because I'm truly thinking about them, their needs, their outlook, their game plan, their goals, whatever it might be, and that builds that trust fairly quickly in my history.
Yeah. To tag along with that, trust is everything. You've got to be able to develop that trust and that rapport with that client there. For me, it's having the knowledge and being competent, so that they then you have the confidence to convey your knowledge to them, right? And they, in turn, have the trust in you that you know what you're doing, you're knowledgeable about all the aspects of the transaction and the real estate and all that there.
The knowledge, I hesitate to speak for these guys, but I bet you they agree with us. I bet all three of us, in most cases, when we're looking at houses, whether it's for a buyer or selling, we think we probably know the market and the value better than the average appraiser these days. I mean, that's a little cocky, but I mean, we've been doing it for a long time, and like, we're inside the houses, and I think we know, okay, that last house got 10 offers, that house sat on the market, you know, the appraiser kind of knows that secondhand looking at data, but they don't know it like we know it, kind of thing, so I think that helps.
Yeah, I think Adrian hit on something. If you put yourself in the buyer's shoes, that you're there to serve them.
Yeah.
You are providing a service to them. If you put yourself in their shoes and you do the things you're supposed to do, the money and the compensation is gonna follow. You gotta focus in on the service and giving them a high level of service and providing that value to them. The money, the commissions, all that stuff is gonna follow, but if you focus on being a service-minded person there, that's what it's all about, because you can create the relationships there and the money will take care of itself.
Yeah, and one of the things I had to kind of watch for is like, maybe it's easier, whatever, like I'm a guy, so it's easier for me to put myself in the guy's shoes sometimes. And, you know, in the past, I've made that mistake is, you know, if it's a couple buying or a family, you're kind of thinking about one person the whole time. You're doing most of communicating with them, but you really, sometimes the silent partner is the one making the decisions. A lot of times you can't ignore that. For sure.
Driving the bus, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is not always apparent.
No, it's not. It's not.
You know, a pretty common theme in building a real estate career is that listings are leverage, and becoming a listing agent is very important for market share and for many other reasons. But there's obviously still a lot of value in just as much value in the buyer's agency as well. Tim, you had mentioned that buyer is kind of your game, and that's what you enjoy doing the most anyway. Why is that?
There's more contact really with the clients. You know, I mean, there is, at least more personal contacts, because it starts off with the, you know, all the showings and you're looking at, you know, house after house. I still get nervous, you know, meeting clients for the first time. I mean, because we go on technically 50 interviews a year.
Right.
You know, I mean, you gotta look at it that way. Like, I'm going into this as an interview, and you do it time and time again. So you gotta have your process down, and that's where that's happening. And so I enjoy that challenge, you know, of it. And then, but again, just all those contacts, you know, with my clients through that time. And they're looking at you, you know, to have that competency and having that experience. And I remember first starting, I'm like, oh, let's try to make this fun. You know, it's a bunch of BS, you know, at times, because it's tough, you know. I mean, if someone's going to say, oh, this mark is easy, they don't know. Now, we can navigate these challenges that come up, and then, you know, we can make it easier, and that can be enjoyable, and sometimes it's fun. There'll be some one-offs. I remember one time it was literally a hot day, and I squatted down into the lockbox and ripped a 10-inch seam right down my back of my pants. And I'm like, there's no way they didn't notice that. And I stood up, and I'm doing this number, you know, in the house with them for a while. I still had 5 houses. They couldn't see this eventually. I just had like, oh, it's okay. We don't even have underarm. But it packed so quickly that, you know, so it became fun that way, right?
Yeah.
And so there's just those opportunities that you have. You never know what's going to happen. Now, listing, you meet them for the first time, you get the appointment, you're on the phone with them a lot, but you don't see them as much. Yeah. And so I just really enjoy that contact.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's the person's first house. It's their dream house. It's their, you know, their smart sizing, downsizing house. It's a river house. It's a fun, you know, like each new purchase is exciting, and that part of it, I like it too. It's exciting. For sure. So.
You mentioned the interview part of it. You know, it's interesting because, like, I guess I started in 2012, and the only time you really thought interview was with the listing. But I remember we had to interview for the conference, like years and years ago. I was like, we're actually interviewing to be a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
I think that happens way more these days. What does y'all's interview process look like? Because, you know, there's, especially now with all of the changes, it's like we've seen all those lists that are posted on Facebook, all the reasons you need a realtor, but still people think they can buy a house of their own. What's the value you provide? Why? How do you answer that question in interviews?
Well, if it's a referral, it's a lot easier to make that connection. And one of the I guess tricks or tactics I use, if it's a sign call, a lead, or whoever it is, and I don't get the buyer appointment first, maybe I'm meeting at the house for the first time, and I decide, you know, it's going to be worthwhile meeting these people. It's a good price point. I had a decent conversation with them, but I can feel that it's not warm and fuzzy at first. It's maybe a little icy. Maybe they don't see the value at first. So instead of, if they're not easy to make that connection with, I turn my focus over to the house. Now, I'm
I'm not a home inspector, but I'm really picking this house apart, because I want them to know, I know what the heck's going on with the house. I'm not an inspector, but I know where the pitfalls are, I know where those things are going on, and I wanna prove, hopefully, that I'm able to point out something that they don't see. They probably know a lot of the stuff, but when you're looking at a house, it's such an emotional thing. I don't care what anybody says, it's very emotional, that they're blinded by, you know, pitfalls of a house, or the positive things of a house, you know, things like that. So I really try to focus my attention on the house first, and then come back to them, so it kind of builds. I show them what I know, basically, or talk about the other house that sold down the street, or the one I sold the other day, or my buddy, you know, whatever it might be, you know. It's gonna be about the market, about the house, and then about them secondary, if it's a kind of a cold or cool lead.
Who's a brand new agent here? So, what Adrian just said, you know, like, this is a key thing. You know, it's if when you go see a house and you can take a peek in the crawl space and it looks like Willy Wonka's worst nightmare in there, and you can tell them why, you know, or if you can get into the up in the attic and take a peek around there and then show them some of those what could be a deficiency later on down the line. So like part of what they're talking about what today is going to be is, well, then how do you become a good referral? And they say, oh my gosh, like Adrian, he's crawling around, he's got a flashlight, he's taking a peek into space, he's not waiting for that inspector.
And I've seen Dean do that too. He's like in a suit and tie,
Yeah.
and like, you know, get dirty, you know, if you will. And like most people, you can see a reaction. Like I can see people seeing that, and you see it. Like, that's really,
You won them over almost immediately just in doing some of those activities right there, because you know, there's some folks that show up in that suit and tie or heel and a dress and like.
Did you get on a roof one time or something for some people and look at something? You know, so it's
Gonna grab the guy by the collar,
almost left.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Besides experience of learning about the houses, how did you learn these things of what to look for?
Home and being engaged at the home inspection.
Yeah.
And you can go the slow route, or you can jump in. I would attach yourself to somebody around your office that you can learn from. You can offer to do the inspection for them, or just shadow. You know, but you
Just
gotta
go
be
on
careful.
those appointments.
Yeah.
So the emails go out all the time. Who wants to hold an open house? But put out there, anybody have an inspection coming up soon? And maybe shadow.
I bet you'll get an email.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then go on that. And then you get to learn the inspectors and the different kinds of inspectors. And then you start looking at your inspection sheets and then how that relates into an addendum. I mean, there's a flow to that. And there was 3 years that we weren't doing a whole lot of repair requests and those kinds of things. And we got back into them like, how did I write this thing again?
It's really good.
Yeah.
I think some of that goes back to providing that value for that client there, right? I think today's customers are more educated than they've ever been. They can look on Zillow, they can look on Realtor.com, they can see property history, when it last transferred, at their fingertips, right there on the phone. You've got to be a step ahead of that.
Yeah.
You know, when you're going on those buyer appointments or going to show a house, you got to be a step ahead of that. They're going to bring up this estimate. They're going to want to know what your take is on the value. Like these guys said, go in the crawl space. I go in every single crawl space. I open up the door of the crawl space and look in there, give it the once over, see if I see any signs of mold, termite, or whatever from there, and I say something. I'm not an inspector, but you know I can see mold right here from the crawl space. It's going to be an issue. I'm looking at the roof line on every single house. If I see a sag or something like that in the center, hey guys, not sure what's going on. When you think about age here, I'm trying, before I go show it, trying to find the age of the roof, age of the windows, age of the siding, age of the heat pump, age of the hot water heater. Those are all the big ticket items. That's right, they might want somebody to just, hey, tell me what I need to know about this house right here so that I can make an informed decision on whether I should buy it or not there. So I think that comes back to providing that value on the actual house itself there too.
And like follow up to that, when you're at the home inspection, I always try to ask the inspector a question that maybe the buyer wouldn't think of or needs to know or whatever else. I'm on their behalf. We're real estate agents. It's an agency. We're acting on behalf of our client. That's what we are. We're part of the Realtor group, but we're agents really. So if you always keep that mindset, I think people sometimes are shocked by it, you know, because you're really an advocate for them. And when you add that shows them value. they don't even have to ask for it, they just feel the value, you know?
Some salesmanship thing too, like if you had an inspection and, inspector shows a picture, I always like to disappear for a minute and go look at it myself. So that way I'm visualizing what the big problem might be. Leaky faucets is one thing, but we're talking, some mold on a joist.
Yeah, let him walk us over there, show it to us.
Yeah, so then that you've educated yourself and you've educated your clients, so then we start looking at, hey, is this important to you or not?
Yeah.
Way easier.
It could be freaking the hell out of them, because if you say, fungus or mold or termites, and people thinking, I'm running away from this house.
And I think that goes back to the importance of actually being there at the inspection.
Yeah.
Because you might see it on a report and it might scare the bejesus out of you.
Yeah.
But if you were there with the inspector, he might be able to say, hey, this is something to immediately repair, watch and monitor, or do nothing.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to have that conversation there with them and know what's what, because I've had it before early in my career where maybe the client couldn't make it, got the report, I tried to talk through it with them over the phone, but they saw the report and maybe freaked out a little bit. But if you're there, you gotta be able to counsel them through that. Is it a big deal? Is it something you just monitor, or something that you need to just watch?
And it's great just to put it right back on the inspector, have him walk everybody over there to it, and point to it, like, oh, I get it now, and all of a sudden, they had no idea what water heater was, or whatever it might be. Be shocked about their reaction sometimes, and they're like, oh, that's all it is? Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Or it's a bigger deal, and it's like, all right, this is probably not gonna work for us, or, we want this all replaced, or it's way better to come to those conclusions at the home inspection while you're there looking at it than talking over it over the phone after they've seen the report. Whenever any buyer sees the report, it's just a list of negative things. Nothing is positive on there to them, and it's just negative. They're like, wow, this is I don't normally get a big list of negative things, especially when I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on something. This is all bad. So you wanna. But to us, it's like, oh, this is normal every day. You can't treat it like that. You have to be back in their shoes again.
Back to her question about going and inspecting and learning that, then in the future, when you're showing houses, okay, the average life expectancy of a heat pump is 12 to 15 years, or we've got one that's knocking on 14 years old that we're selling right here, you may need to prepare for that, or a hot water heater, or a 30-year shingle on a roof, and we got a new refrigerant change coming up next year on all the HVAC units that I think we need to be talking to our folks about repair versus replacement and things like that we need to be knowledgeable of.
One of the biggest complaints that I hear from listing agents, or as we're going through the process, and they kind of take a deep breath, like, oh gosh, you know what you're talking about, because there's a lot of new agents that would try to over broker something. They think they see a problem, and it's actually something that the client doesn't even care about. But they're kind of going a little bit too far with it, and you start pushing it, with the listing agent, at that point. But age is under deficiency. You see that a lot when you're trying to get something replaced, even though it's not leaking, or yes, knocking on 14 years, kind of thing. But it's only been one person living in that house, not putting a whole lot of stress, on that system, whatever it might be. And so it's just
and find you a good home inspector who's reasonable as well too.
Correct.
Right? One that you can say, talk to them just like we're sitting here talking right now. Hey, this is a big deal. You need to be thinking about this because this could really blow up in your face. Or, hey, this may or may not be a big deal. I mean, I've had some in the past, and we have vendors on our list who are on our list and they're there for a reason, and some that are no longer on our list. I had an inspector one time early in my career walking on a slate roof. You're not supposed to do anyway. Stepped on it. Slate comes loose and goes down like a Plinko chip. Down on the ground. Takes a picture of it and says, slate, loose, missing slate. And he just knocked it off. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, this guy. And then he proceeded to do a lot of other things during the inspection and kind of blew up the deal there on stuff that honestly wasn't important.
You don't forget.
You don't forget those. And there are guys that are on your,
better.
exactly. So get you a good inspector that you can at least have a rapport with of what's reasonable and what's not reasonable and set those expectations.
Tim, to your point with with the listing agent making sure they want to be a good buyer, or making sure they have a good buyer's agent on the other end of the deal, I think a lot of folks, they get into real estate and talk about the importance of negotiating. I think it's good to be a good negotiator, but I think at the center of all that is having a good relationship with many other agents in the market, right? At this point, you guys have relationships with tons of agents, not just here, but elsewhere. If you talk about the importance of that, not just relationships with your clients, but with the other realtors too.
I think some realtors can at times maybe create problems that they can then solve and show value, which is not acting in the best interest of your client. You know, if, sure, your job is to get them the house at the lowest, the best terms, lowest price, what have you, but you don't wanna over broker, I love that, term, I've never used that before, but over negotiate or something like that when you're risking your client maybe not getting the house and they're very willing to pay X price or whatever it is. But you wanna secure that house, you wanna get it for them, if that's their goal, you wanna meet that goal. Yeah, you wanna de-escalate anything like that, when it's all about, you know, you against the seller or whatever. No, this is about us finding the house, the best fit for you guys. And you can't always say it that bluntly to them, but sometimes you want to, but that's what you gotta remember, that's the goal here, you know, and sometimes you get caught up to it as well, you know. I can be a competitive guy, I wanna win against the other agent or whatever, but you gotta take a step back and remember, that's not my job. If I'm doing that, I'm acting on behalf of myself, not my client.
Yeah. I think having relationships with the other agents around is huge. It's huge, especially in a competing offer situation and things like that.
Yeah.
I think on the other side, I do a fair amount of listing side too, as long with the buyer side. I mean, I think you want somebody who is knowledgeable and is gonna try to make it as smooth a ride as possible, you know, for all parties involved, but it's gonna be reasonable, right? If, you know, every transaction may have some hiccups and speed bumps, whatever you wanna call it, but, you know, it's how you work through those things, right? If there's mold in a crawl space and you just freak, oh my God, you need to run. You tell your clients, well, I think we all know that from talking to our inspectors and everybody we know, about 80% of homes in Central Virginia have some sort of fungus, mold, or mildew in the crawl space, guys. So don't be surprised if it's here.
Yeah.
There's ways to treat this, there's ways to remedy this. You need to stop the source of the problem. Maybe we need to get, you know, a mold remediation company out here and do these things. I think it's about setting those expectations up front and having that demeanor of, you've got the resourcefulness, you've got the knowledge to guide them through anything. And now if we come to a bump in the road where there is for instance, structural issue, and we've got a bid on this thing and it's $15,000 to fix a structural issue, well, the seller's not willing to budge at all, guys, I hate to tell you, maybe walk away from this thing, right? You know, and I'm gonna try to negotiate first. And if they say no, well, you do realize, Mr. or Mrs. Listing Agent, you're not gonna need to disclose this to every other interested party out there. So you might as well fix this for us, that we have a ready, willing, and able buyer ready to close once you get this done, you know? But some points, you can't always make it work, but I've had people not understand that at the time, but they've also later on been thankful for me for saying, nah, you need to walk away, and then you go find something else.
That's a big hero move right there, you know, because you're looking at what's getting you paid, and say, you know, we're gonna walk away from this. You know, that's a big deal.
I think it goes back to following the service, that's just providing that service for them and what's best for them, and the money will follow, because you can go find them in our house, right?
Sure.
That's probably be a better fit. They don't realize it at the time maybe, but it's probably the best thing for them, so
Any questions from the crowd?
I have a question. So you mentioned that sometimes you don't really know who the decision maker is when you're sitting at the table or sitting in the house. Sometimes the decision maker or influencers aren't even there or not even in the state or whatever else. How do you deal with the outside influences, not only during the buying time, the contract time, but the inspection time? You know, sometimes you get a lot of experts coming in, giving some advice too. How do you deal with that?
I think you gotta navigate and set the expectations there up front. We've had that plenty of times where dad's contractor or was a contractor or had that kind of thing coming in and maybe picking apart a house, and I think it's you really gotta sort of break that down to the client as to who's making the decisions there and who's really gonna be the one that's gotta live with it. Of course, mom and dad are gonna be looking out for them, or an uncle or whoever there, but they're the ones that have to live with it there. And I think you gotta decide ask them what's important to them. And I think that brings up a good point there, Dean, about having the conversation with them up front about the box that get checked in paragraph 14 on the home inspection part, of having to actually ask for the repairs, or the other box of you can just walk away, having that conversation up front. of if there is something really awry that you wanna walk away from, that you can do that. But it's I guess to answer that, Dean, it's not a one-size-fits-all type thing. It's really what the dynamics of the family, the situation is, that you need to kind of evaluate and navigate.
It can be tough. I mean, I try to, you want to certainly be respectful, even though that party is not a part of the contract. They're certainly one of the decision makers, even though they're not signing anything a lot of times. Sometimes they are putting a little, giving gift money or things like that, but also try to bring it back to, okay, well, our budget is $350, and this is very normal for this house. To get something a little bit better, we're gonna be outside of the school district or way further out, or, if we're, wanting a new house, I think, they're at a premium right now, but it's gonna be double the budget or something like that, and bringing it back to, okay, I agree with you, this house is not perfect, it's gonna need X, Y, and Z, but this is what's normal for the price range in the market, maybe slightly better. But back to that, I like to point out those things during the initial showing. We talked about that earlier. It's much easier for them to stomach things when they're excited and looking at a house, like, that one's looking a little bit old, remember that warranty I told you about, probably gonna want it on this house, and just kind of go through, pick out not only the positives, but the negatives of every single house, and try to lay that out there very early in the game, so they're more prepared to also talk to family members as well later if they've got a better understanding. They've walked through with the inspector, looked at the thing, there's not as much mystery, especially if you're dealing with a younger buyer or inexperienced buyer.